About 6 years ago, Mercedes-Benz introduced the CLA class. Now that vehicle stirred up quite a controversy because it was the first ever front-wheel drive based Mercedes-Benz here in America. Now despite the controversy, it actually grew to become a pretty successful seller, and what it did the most was attract a new, younger audience to the brand, which is why I'm standing by the all-new 2020 CLA. Now this is not just any CLA, this is the all-new CLA 35, a new entry point into the Mercedes-AMG family, and under the hood it has a 302 horsepower turbocharged 4-cylinder, standard 4MATIC plus all-wheel drive, and a 7-speed speed shift dual clutch transmission. It's designed to go head-to-head with Audi's S3 and the new BMW M235i Grand Coupe. So today I'm here in Scottsdale, Arizona, and the big question I want answered, if you guys are an enthusiast with a GTI, should you be looking at the CLA 35 AMG as a replacement? That's what we're here to find out. So with any Mercedes-AMG product, you're probably wondering what's going on underneath the hood. Now the base CLA 250 has a 2-liter turbocharged engine. That makes 221 horsepower, up 13 horsepower versus the old one. Now this is the motor that's an all-new engine for 2020. This is the CLA 35. It also has a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder, but with the wick turned up to 302 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque. Now that puts the CLA 35 in the middle of the lineup because there's also a CLA 45, which has about 382 horsepower, or 416 if you guys go for the S model. Now this is the one that's kind of the Goldilocks in the lineup. It all goes out through a 7-speed speed shift dual clutch transmission. It's an all new dual clutch design, tuned of course by Mercedes-AMG. Now this is standard with their performance 4MATIC all-wheel drive, so it has the ability to appropriate the power at a 50-50 rate. And Mercedes didn't have final fuel economy figures yet. The regular 250 is rated at 23 in the city, 33 on the highway. I imagine this is going to be somewhat close to that. Be sure to put premium gas in it. They didn't have the final weight figures yet, but I'd say this one weighs around 3,600 pounds. Mercedes-Benz says you'll get to 60 in around 4.5 seconds. Now when it comes to the design, the original CLA was based off of the A-Class, which Mercedes did not offer in America for the longest time. Now that they offer the A-Class here in the States, it's allowed the CLA to move up market. So this is now a little bit larger, a little bit sleeker, and more expensive than the A-Class design. Now looking at the overall look of the new CLA, you can see this is instantly recognizable as a CLA. It's a very evolutionary look versus the previous generation. The one thing that Mercedes did upgrade is every CLA will come standard with full LED headlights. You'll have LED low and high beams, LED daytime running lights, LED turn signals. This one here has the upgraded adaptive LEDs. So these are swiveling headlights. They look very nice. It actually, again, reminds you of the CLS class, which is what the original CLA was based off of. This AMG model, of course, has its own unique grille with the AMG badge over there. And then you have slightly more aggressive AMG tuned bumpers here, although I am sad to report that some of the vents here are not functional vents. But nevertheless, with this polar white exterior with the AMG night package that my tester has here, it is a rather distinctive looking car. And if you guys think the regular A-Class looks a little bit too bland, this is supposed to be the coupe-ified version. So again, the two vehicles ride on the exact same platform. Now looking at the wheel choices, this one here is an optional 19-inch wheel. They're wrapped in 245/35 series tires. You can see it's got AMG specific brakes. The rotors are cross-drilled and vented. Overall, I like the black look with the polar white exterior. This is kind of what's exactly in nowadays, especially when you guys go for the night package. This panoramic sunroof that you're seeing here is actually standard, which is really nice because usually a lot of brands charge you $1,000 extra for it. It does go mostly to the back seats as well, but it really makes the cabin a lot nicer. And then looking at the rest of the profile of this car, its wheelbase has been stretched by about 1 inch versus the previous generation at about 184 inches long. This is about 5 inches longer than the new A-Class, about 2 inches longer overall versus the old CLA class. Now coming over to the rear of the vehicle, you can see it's got a much more distinctive design versus the A-Class. Some of you have told me that the A-Class sedan kind of looks like a Hyundai or Kia product. This just looks like a traditional Mercedes-Benz product. I love the fact that the rear deck lid here kind of tailors down and has this nice tasteful integrated spoiler. You've got the usual badging here, CLA 35 AMG. And then down here you can see the exhaust tips. These are a unique exhaust tip for the AMG model. It also has its unique sound. I'll let you guys hear what that engine sounds like real quick. And in typical AMG fashion, the engine sounds fantastic, so I'm looking forward to going out and test driving this thing. Now, the one thing they did change, the old model had the license plate integrated here. They've moved that here to the lower part of the bumper, which does clean up the look nicely. And then looking at the trunk capacity, because the CLA is about 5 inches longer than the A-Class, there is more trunk space, around 11.6 cubic feet of space. That is about 2 cubic feet more than the A-Class. The seats also fold down in a 60-40 manner with a ski pass-through. So overall, the trunk capacity is not bad for something that's this size. So the new CLA is definitely one attractive looking car on the outside, but what about the interior? Mercedes typically does a good job with that. First thing I'm going to show you guys, here is the current Mercedes key fob. You can see this is their newer one. It even says AMG here to let you know that you do have the AMG model, even though this is designed to be more of an AMG light. But as you approach the door handle of the CLA 35, you can see there's an area here where you can touch the door handle. That'll lock the doors for you. It'll also fold in the mirrors when you have it set to do that. To unlock it, touch the back of the door handle and that will unlock the door for you. Now, my tester has the exact color combination that I would purchase for myself with this polar white exterior, the upgraded $1,500 for the full leather interior with the AMG sport seats. That's $3,000 extra for those sport seats, but I love the two-tone with the red and the black, the contrasting white stitching. It's got the gray finished, matte finished wood here, which is really nice. It also has the upgraded Burmester sound system, which sounds fantastic. These seats are also heated and cooled. They're multi-contoured seats. They're like 10-way adjustable with a 3-person memory on both sides of the front seat. So on the driver's side and on the passenger side. So again, this interior makes an amazing first impression for a base or a baser line Mercedes-AMG product. This looks fantastic. It gives me a sense that, you know, you're in the bigger AMG GT, a 4-door, or like a CLS class. Now, stepping inside, the CLA definitely has a low step-in height because this is, again, a sedan and it's more of a performance sedan. It's a little bit lowered compared to the base model. Now, shutting the door, it actually sounds really solid. For a car that has pillarless glass frame doors, it has that really solid thunk. So again, a typical German car adds to that impression of quality. To start the vehicle up, you know how to start up a car. Just put your foot on the brake. The button here to fire up the engine is right there. And you can see the vehicle starts right up, and you can see the 35 model comes standard with 2 screens here. These are the 2 10-inch displays. They're a 10.25-inch display. It's part of their MBUX infotainment system. So if you say things like, "Hey Mercedes," it's going to pop up and annoyingly, you know, tell you how she can help, but for some reason it didn't do that. The engine itself also has a nice sound. When you switch it over to its sports setting here, from the little dynamic selector, you can see it sounds like it's a little bit of an augmented sound, but I do look forward to driving this thing. We'll talk about the sound later on in the test drive. Now, looking at the rest of this cabin, you can see you've got the MB Tex stitch dash with some genuine stitching. The wood grain looks great. This car has a beautiful interior ambient lighting where you could literally customize the lighting to your choice. This interior is very similar to the A-Class, the A220 that I showed you guys a couple months ago, with some differences. Obviously, the steering wheel is unique. Really like the steering wheel with the flat bottom. It's got the suede Alcantara. You can option in like a sport track package, which would include a little rotary dial here for the drive mode selector, which my tester does not have. The wheel itself is just a manual tilt telescoping, which is fine. It's what I basically expected in this segment. You can see here the wood grain is continued over. You have more red leather. The windows are one-touch automatic up-down for all 4. You can see your heated and cooled seats are over here. This is like a $1,500 or $1,000 option if you guys want the heated and cooled seats. Your headlight controls are over there. Your transmission controller is over here. When you put the vehicle in reverse, you can see my tester has the full 360 camera, which gives you an amazing view. It has parking sensors front and rear. So again, Mercedes does a really good job with the infotainment system. The MBUX, you can literally control it from voice. You can control it from a touchscreen here. It does include Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, but not the wireless Apple CarPlay, which is annoying. You have to connect it to the USB-C over here if you want that. My tester also has a wireless phone charger right there, which is $250 extra. The navigation system also includes their augmented reality, which means if you're driving along, it shows directions, or it shows a camera image from over here and displays it into the nav with the overlay of the street name. So again, that is something Mercedes-Benz did first. The GPS is fantastic. This is one of the best ones in the business. You basically can compete with Audi's Google Earth with something like this, especially with that virtual augmented reality. Love the dashboard vents, the way they look. Some of you who don't like circular vents may not like this. I like how there's still traditional buttons here for the dual zone climate control. You have cup holders over here where you can, again, push these out for smaller or bigger drinks. This pad here controls the MBUX as well, or you can use the touch controls. You can see there's a lot of shortcut buttons here. Your dynamic selector is over here. You can go to Sport, Sport Plus, Comfort, Individual, and there's also a slippery ice mode, of course. This is a nice area to rest your hands. Over here you can see the glove or the center console is a little bit small. There is a USB port in there. It is lined with felt as well. The seats are definitely, they hug you for sure. They're a little bit hard for my taste. They do have a nice adjustable bolster over there, but I like how these are the sport seats, and you can also get them in a heated and cooled function. There's also like an Alcantara seat, which I much prefer this. This is a little bit, you know, more comfortable versus the suede. They're a little bit softer, but they could be a little bit, or they also could be even more soft. The glove compartment you can see is a good size. It's not damped, I'm sorry, it's damped, but it's not lined with felt, but it does go in pretty deep. And then above me, this panoramic sunroof, as I said earlier, is standard, which is nice. It goes to almost the backseat area, but this does let in a lot of natural light. And then you have LED lighting throughout the cabin. So overall, this interior, very nice. Love the way that, you know, Mercedes has kept it looking very high quality and premium. In terms of cheap materials, there's a couple. There's some cheap plastic over here, and then some of the plastic behind the aluminum door handles here feels a little bit cheap, but they've strategically placed it in areas where you're not going to necessarily touch all the time. So I'd say for in this segment, compared to the S3 and the BMW's current interior setup, this is the best one that you can get in the business. Now, because the CLA has that sloping roofline, you do lose some headroom back here, and I'm short, I'm 5'7", and I have to duck my head pretty bad. Mercedes says you lose about 2 inches of headroom, but once you actually get back here and shut the door, it's not bad, but as somebody who's not very tall, my head is already touching the ceiling. So keep that in mind, because if you guys have tall friends, you're probably gonna want the A-Class instead. Now, looking at the rest of the space back here, these sport seats, again, are actually nicely sculpted so they don't intrude too much on your knee space. Mercedes says you get around 33.9 inches of legroom back here, which is pretty small, but remember, this is a small car. There's a relatively large hump here that will intrude on your middle passenger. There's 2 rear seat air vents back here, and then the rest of this interior, you can see there's a nice armrest here that folds down. They give you 2 cup holders, but there's no heated rear seats back here. But if you open that up, you do get 2 USB-C charging ports. So the first generation Mercedes CLA was definitely a controversial car when it first came out back in 2014. I mean, let's be honest, a lot of enthusiasts balked at the idea of a front-wheel drive Mercedes-Benz. It just didn't make sense here in America, where this is a premium performance brand. Now, driving the second generation model, this has actually been a relatively successful model for Mercedes. The company consistently moves around 20 to 25,000 every year. And because the new A-Class is in the lineup, I had a chance to show you guys that a couple months ago, the CLA has been able to move a little bit more up market. They've made it, you know, sleeker looking, they've made it longer, wider, they've added a new model. This particular one, the AMG 35 model, is the new entry point into the CLA or the AMG family. It's one of the least expensive AMGs you can buy. And Mercedes-Benz is touting the car up as like the first ever, or the least expensive entry-level AMG model. So with about 302 horsepower, 295 foot-pounds of torque, this has the kind of performance figures as something like a Volkswagen Golf R, Audi S3, a BMW M240i. And Mercedes says you'll get to 60 in around 4.6 seconds when you use the race start feature. Now, this car in general feels very much like a CLA. When you put your foot down, the 7-speed dual clutch is way better tuned than the previous generation. The old dual clutch was really jerky, was really kind of sluggish to respond. And Mercedes has really worked hard to make the transmission much more responsive in this new version. It definitely feels like it's a car that'll get to 60 in around 4.6 seconds. There's actually a CLA 45 above this car that I'll be driving at a later date that has about 80 more horsepower than this thing, about 116 more if you go for the S model. So it is pretty impressive that Mercedes offers this kind of performance at the lower end. The sound of this engine also isn't too bad. Mercedes usually does a really good job at sound. God, that's annoying. The four-cylinder actually is pretty smooth and it revs hard. It pulls hard all the way up to about 6,500 RPM. It just doesn't have the same kind of crackles and pops that you would get with the other AMG models. I'm wondering if AMG did that because this is supposed to be more of like an AMG light. This is, again, an Audi S3 competitor, and that's where it falls in the line. Because the old one, you either had the CLA 250 or you had the AMG model, which was just, you know, a $20,000 hike versus this one. So they've now kind of filled an empty void that they needed to fill, which is a nice addition to the lineup. Now this car does have launch control, so to engage it, I'm gonna assume you're gonna just turn the traction control off, which somewhere over here, there we go. So it puts into a sport mode, and you should just be able to floor the brake and the accelerator. And because this thing has their 4MATIC performance all-wheel drive system, it automatically will shift or split the power 50-50. So you'll have 50% front, 50% rear. Remember, this is still a front drive biased car, and it definitely feels quick. It sounds good, and 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds feels about right. Remember, for those of you who want something crazier, you're gonna want something like the AMG 45 model. I did notice when you had it in the race start mode, the transmission shifted a little harshly, but I feel like that's kind of the norm when you guys are using the launch control. It shifts hard, it shifts quick. You're gonna notice it shifts more aggressively, obviously, when you have it in sport and dynamic settings. Now, the one thing I really appreciate about this car is just the overall feel. I love the way the driver's seat kind of hugs you, although I will say the seats are a little bit hard. The AMG seats typically have a little bit more of an aggressive bolstering, but they just need a little bit softer cushioning. I love the suede material that's on the steering wheel, but just keep in mind this is going to look like crap in a couple years, and the suede steering wheel is going to be a little bit harder to keep looking nice, but it feels really good in your hands. The steering itself actually has really good feedback to it. It's very light, but it's very quick, precise. The body of this car just feels really secure and stiff. Like it's stiff to the point where it's on smooth roads like this, I find the ride quality to be comfortable. But when you guys are driving on broken pavement or, you know, in rush hour traffic on certain conditions, I did notice it had more road noise than I liked on certain road conditions, and the ride got a little bit firm. Remember, these are a 19-inch wheel, a low-profile tire, which looks good, but you're going to have to deal with a harsher ride quality. Now, when you go into like a comfort setting here, you will notice that the steering gets a little bit lighter, but the adaptive dampers don't really change the damping too much of this car. It's still a relatively harsher ride than what most people are probably used to. Now, in terms of the visibility, the CLA, the first generation, wasn't the easiest car to see out of, especially when you looked out of the back. This new version, you know, you still have the same kind of similar sight lines. The hood has these two bulges that you're kind of looking over, and then the A-pillar here is rather thick. The side mirrors are small, but most of these models will come with their autonomous emergency braking as standard. But if you want the extra stuff, like the full driver's assistance, Mercedes typically makes you pay extra for a package. The view out of the back actually isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I can still see out of it relatively well, although there is a high trunk lid, so you can't really see where the rear bumper is. It's a good thing this car has a bunch of cameras around it and sensors, because you're going to be utilizing that. But overall, compared to the A-Class, which I drove earlier this year, the car doesn't really feel that much longer, even though it is 5 inches longer than that vehicle. In general, you just get a sense that you're driving a car that, you know, is a step up from, let's say, a Volkswagen GTI that you're probably thinking about getting rid of. All right, so I finally found some curvy roads in the CLA 35 AMG. I've switched the car into Sport Plus mode, and Mercedes says they've given this car unique suspension, obviously grippier tires, bigger wheels and tires, a performance 4MATIC all-wheel drive system, and I have to say the feel of this car is very nice. I mean, obviously there is a higher performing version, but driving this car almost makes you think, do you really need the 45 model? Although I have not driven it. This car has plenty of power, great steering feel, seats that hug you, and really, you could have a blast driving this thing to and from work, and then finding your favorite back road or curvy road like I am here just north of Scottsdale, Arizona. Now, I do wish the car was a little bit louder in this kind of condition. I just wanted to hear a little bit more snarl from the exhaust, but this is probably a good happy medium. And I'm noticing the transmission is huge improvements over the old one. I do kind of think that Mercedes should have added an extra 2 gears to it. They've got a 9-speed dual clutch in their bigger products. And I am noticing the 7-speed lacks a few extra gears to kind of keep the engine in the meat of its power band. Like there are certain times where I put my foot down all the way and I'm waiting for it to downshift, but it's not doing that. And then there are times if you go slow enough, it will. But man, is this thing really haul. Like if you guys are looking to get out of your hot hatch and into something like this because you're looking to seriously upgrade, this is definitely going to feel like that upgrade. Mercedes-AMG just does a really good job with their whole package setup. The car itself just makes you feel like you really paid a lot more, which you did to get a car like this, but it feels like the whole package. And overall, in terms of the way the chassis feels, it actually doesn't have quite as much understeer as I expected it to, considering this is a front drive chassis. The summer tires really are gripping well. It's about 56 degrees out here. But yeah, I'm definitely noticing this is the kind of car that you can get into a lot of trouble with. And it kind of just forces you to drive fast. AMG models just always kind of make you want to drive faster, get around everyone else, because they just are so well packaged. And in this car, it definitely gets me excited to drive the 45 model, but really if you don't want to be spending a ludicrous amount of money for the entry-level Mercedes, you could have a lot of fun with the 35 model. So it's a huge welcome addition to the CLA lineup. Now, the original CLA managed to sell around 20 to 25,000 units annually, and a lot of enthusiasts actually traded up from a GTI into the first generation CLA. Now, with the all-new 2020 model, I'm happy to report that it has all of the characteristics that we like about the CLA. It's still a really sexy looking car, much sleeker looking versus the A-Class. It's got a completely new interior that is just worlds better versus the previous generation, which had a lot of cheap materials. And even though the space is still a little bit tight, I imagine people who are coming from a GTI are going to be willing to make that kind of sacrifice. This car in general, I think, looks better than the current generation Audi A3 and S3. And the new BMW M235i also looks good, but I think the CLA has a much sleeker, much more sportier appearance to it. I really like the 35 model. It's the perfect Goldilocks in the lineup because with around 300 horsepower, all-wheel drive, this is not quite as bonkers fast as the CLA 45, but you get all the similar amounts of performance compared to that vehicle at a much more affordable price tag. Now, speaking of the price, what's it going to cost to put a CLA 35 in your driveway? Well, this car starts at around $36,000 for the base 250, add $2,000 for 4MATIC all-wheel drive. You're going to spend about $10,000 more for the 35. This car starts at $46,900. Now, that is right in line with something like the Audi S3, which is around $44,000. The BMW M235i Grand Coupe, they just announced pricing on that. It's around $46,500. So this is a little bit more expensive, but typical with Mercedes-Benz, you're going to be paying a little bit more for the sleeker design. Now, of course, this one here is not the base model. In fact, in terms of options, this is practically as loaded as you can get with the night package, with the energizing comfort package, with the premium package, with the driver assistance package. This one has its stickers for $66,000, which is a stupid amount of money. I think it's a little bit overpriced by about $5,000. I think if you keep easy on the options, for around $58,000, this car makes sense, but around $66,000, you could probably step up to a C-Class. So my recommendation, keep the options kind of more in check to keep this thing under $60,000. With all that said, I hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on this 2020 Mercedes-AMG CLA 35. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at redline_reviews. Like us on Facebook, and as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.